Hello, welcome to this episode of the Financial Incline. I'm your host, John Bovard. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by Greg Goddard. Greg is the owner and operator of 17 different Penn Station franchises located in Ohio and Northern Kentucky. During our conversation, we discuss how Greg transitioned from working on the corporate side of Penn Station to taking a leap of faith and becoming a franchise owner. We discussed the exact details of the first deal that Greg was able to acquire 11 different Penn Station locations located in the Cleveland area. We talk about how he finances his deals and how he goes about sourcing the different deals that he has. Also, during our conversations, we talk about the ups and downs of being in the restaurant business and operating something where you have hundreds of different employees. We talk about the scale that is required to get to critical mass when you are looking to become a franchise owner in any restaurant, and in particular, his Penn Station locations. So if you have ever considered maybe starting a restaurant franchise or getting in on the business, make sure you tune into this conversation with myself and Greg Goddard. I hope you enjoy. Hey, Greg, how's it going?
Doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm doing well. So for those listening and for those watching in, I gave a brief introduction about who you are, what we'll be talking about today. But for those that are on the call, and would you mind sharing just a little bit of your background and kind of what that led to what you're doing today?
Yeah, so I have a relatively unique background or career path, rather. At this point, I own and operate 17 Penn Station locations between Northern Kentucky and Cleveland, Ohio. Getting there has been quite the journey and the path. I think the 4-minute rundown on that is grew up in Cincinnati, graduated from Moeller in 2004. Unstrategically, I was one of the few kids that didn't go to college, kind of went straight to work and built a reputation of hard work and strong relationships. And one thing led to another, and got a lucky break back in 2012 or 2010. Ended up at P&G, and they had a new franchising division called Agile Pursuits, which was Tide Dry Cleaners and Mr. Clean Car Wash. And was there for 3 years, learned a ton, and then was recruited over to Penn Station Inc., which is a franchisor, in 2012. And I was there until 2020, and had a great career at Penn Station. Loved every minute of it. When I left, I ran real estate marketing and development. So effectively, all the new business within that company, from site selection to franchisee selection to managing the national advertising fund. For me, I think I had a lot of exposure to a different side of the business I didn't know about, not being, I guess, formally educated from a financial standpoint, et cetera. And kind of starting, growing up in a blue collar household, I, through the relationships, kind of started piecing together the puzzle of how to get to that next level and how to acquire assets. And I felt, in the simplest form, I was traveling around the country building everybody else's businesses, and they didn't do anything or know anything differently than I did. And I spent most of 18, 19, 20 meeting with anybody and everybody I could, both first and second generation successful entrepreneurs and the Fortune 500 guys, and just trying to listen. I learned finally, that my learning style was through conversation. And I think I finally learned that I was smart. You just couldn't prove it on paper, in school. So, long story short, took a big risk in 2020 and asked the founder of Penn Station permission to switch sides. I love the brand, the product, and the people, and everything I did. I just wanted to have a little more flexibility in my life, build a portfolio for my family, see my 4 kids a little bit more. So had a great conversation in September of 20. Got permission to go out and acquire a Penn Station. And, I figured at that time I'd scrape everything together and I could buy 1 to 3 Penn Stations in greater Cincinnati. And I effectively gave notice on my career. It with a 6 month exit plan. And month 3, I had nobody willing to sell because they're good assets to own. So I had no job in 3 months, and I had no assets. And one of the best operators in the system was up in Cleveland. And I was talking to Jeff, the founder and CEO of Penn Station. He said, "Gigi, what are you going to do?" And I said, "Well, you think Mike wants to retire?" And he said, "Yeah, call him." So I called the franchisee up in Cleveland up and said, "Hey, I heard you want to retire." And he said, "I do." And he gave me a number. And I said, "I know your financials. That's fair. I'll get you an LOI tonight." And he said, "Can you finance it by yourself?" And I said, "Absolutely not, but I have the network to do it." And from September 20, I was out of, unemployed effectively in February 21, closed on the 11 stores in Cleveland in June 2021. So,
Yep. Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that background. A lot to unpack with that, and very impressive to go from 0 to 11. That was quite the apple to take a bite of. So, with that, you mentioned you would meet the franchisees and the people that were running these, and you kind of saw like, hey, if these guys can do it, I can do it. What were some of those characteristics that led to? So one, it's having kind of that technical knowledge to be able to do that, but what were some of the other reasons as to why you would leave the corporate side and want to go into the, what I would refer to as kind of the business ownership side? Not only, it sounds like you knew you could do it from a technical skill standpoint, but what were some of the other reasons why you decided to do that?
Yeah, I mean, franchising is unique because it's really staged entrepreneurialism, right? You're not creating a concept from scratch. You're not creating a lot of it. You have a lot of influence in that. But I had in this journey of mine, meeting with people and hearing their stories, that was always my opening question. I mean, anywhere from guys that own massive liquor stores to development to whatever. It was always, my question was always, I just want to hear your story. I want to hear how you went from A to B. How'd you go from 18, no college, living in Covington, to 60, $30 million revenue company? What'd that look like? Yeah. And I like to hear that. And, fortunately I have, I was born with a work ethic and a personality, so I could usually get in those conversations. But one of those guys who now happens to be my partner kind of said, he was asking me all these questions about what I wanted to do. And I said, I got 4 kids and I got tuition and, X, Y, and Z, and, life goes on, and I'm 35 at that time. And he kind of said, "Hey, you got 2 options. You can either shut up and do something about it, or you go back to work and be happy." And, I knew for me, I had a bigger fear of not succeeding or trying than I had a fear of failure. So, my DNA was I'm completely fine risking everything for the upside, which I think you're either born with or not. I mean, a lot of people won't take that risk, and it is, reasonably terrifying. But in that process too, you understand that when I looked at everything, I looked at other businesses and whatnot before, and when you get down to it, if you have the opportunity to buy something that you understand inside and out, for me, that was Penn Station. That was my career on the other side of the table. So I knew the financials. I knew what the best part of it for me is. I didn't grow up working in restaurants, right? I grew up caddying. I grew up cutting grass and that kind of stuff. But I've never worked in a restaurant in my life until I started at Penn Station Inc. when I went through training. And I got to see what the best operators did. I got to see what the worst operators did. And that, for me is super helpful, because you can walk in on day one and everything about the business. I know the widget inside and out, right? I've never owned the widget. I've never had complete control over that widget, but I knew it. And so if you're going to put everything you've ever made on the line and bet essentially your whole family's, financial freedom, to have the opportunity to do it in something that inside and out is very beneficial.
Yep. That's awesome. So going from what you described of connecting with that owner in Cleveland to getting the LOI. So what was So you get the LOI accepted. Kind of walk us through that first deal of those first 11. From LOI phase to close to maybe the first 30 days. What was all involved in that process?
Yeah, so that was a process in and of itself, right? And there's no definition, I guess, of normality in a deal. And that wasn't evident until the next one when you can compare and contrast it to.
Right.
And, I've always said, like, you don't fully appreciate your parents until you have kids because you don't understand what they, had to go through to
Mm-hmm.
raise kids.
Right.
So, going from LOI, it was an interesting process because I kind of did it ass backwards. And I think one of the things I've learned in different deals is it is so much about managing expectations and timelines. And really the hardest part, I think, is personalities involved. And you have to kind of be a little bit of a chameleon. A good contract is something that two people will sign, right? So you have to be considerate. And I've seen deals blow up over not taking that position. So at the end of the day, the goal is to get the deal done. And I know what I can control in that process, and I know what I can control in that deal going forward. So I went LOI quickly, really strong banking relationship that I've had. Kind of went through the terms of that deal, put a sim together for him to go through. Got a semi quasi commitment letter. Wasn't really official, but just to kind of show the seller the seller's risk, right, is he knew that he could either he had one person inside the system that he could sell to that had a health issue he couldn't buy. So his alternative was either go through an investment bank because it was a pretty sizable asset and sell it that way,
Right.
or me, I'm a bit of a white knight in this situation because he has no expense, or he didn't want to go through that process. He wanted a very simple. He ran a really, really good business for 27 years, and he wanted his people taken care of, and he wanted to be simple. And I knew that I had the benefit of knowing the seller, right? So that helps. I know how he ticks and how he operates. And so got him a quasi commitment letter. And then at that point you go, well, I can't go borrow that kind of money on my first deal, with really just pulling everything together that you've ever built when you're still relatively young. So then it was kind of going through the network of people that want to put money to work, which there's a really big network of direct investments out there. So my position on that one was basically, here's the deal that I have, here's how much I'm paying myself, which was just as the minimum I could take. I just, backing up, what I wanted to do when I left corporate life was replace my existing base salary and get on first base in the investment world, right? That's it. I didn't need to go make $5 million the first year. I just wanted to be able to get out of corporate so that I could make an investment. I could put money to work. I could build a portfolio for myself and my family, but I could also be out of the office. I can go take meetings that I want to take, and I can go do things I want to do. So my objective there was, I'm going to pay myself this. This is how much of the equity I can afford to buy without doing side letters and all this stuff. Keep it simple. And then here's what's available, and kind of work through that process with, a network, and, find a couple guys that align really well with you to get started. Because there was two ways it could go. You either go buy a really big, highly profitable company as a small group, or you could go try to buy one Penn Station, and you'd have complete control over it, but you're still going to be limited on scale because you only have that one. So it was a very long process. LOI was late November. I would tell you that you can't control the other side of the equation. And I think that, there's not a lawyer out there that can define reasonableness, but, the seller's counsel and the buyer's counsel, you got to manage them too in that process. So I was fortunate to have a really good attorney who, in Aaron, and, that, and the seller had a very old school kind of, it was tough. You got to manage that. You got to manage partners. You got to manage the seller. You got to manage the bank. You got to manage the attorney. You got to manage the accountant. So it's an interesting process
Yes, indeed it is.
while
Yeah.
being unemployed, burning
Right.
in a hurry.
Right. Right. You probably saw those attorney and accountant fees just racking up in your head, thinking, oh my
Yeah,
God.
I delayed
Uh,
payment on the attorney.
yeah, that's right. So, well, great. So when you're looking at Penn Station, so obviously you bought a portfolio of them right away. What sort of determines a good location and a great opportunity from maybe a not so good opportunity?
Man,
How do you go about
that
determining?
is quite literally $1 million question,
Yep.
right? So, in Cleveland, I was very fortunate. I think you do things the right way. There's probably a little bit of karma in life, right? So, try to live life the right way, and Cleveland just lined up perfectly. We got bought it at a time when Penn Station never allowed delivery. Delivery started in October of 21. The financials and the valuation was done on September 21 back. So I get this massive revenue increase post closing. Inflation hadn't hit yet. It went gangbusters. It was awesome. And I haven't built any new locations. Now I did that on the other side for a long time, and it's part art, part science. I think on a very simplistic form of site selection, especially in retail and restaurants, is people overcomplicate it.
Yep.
If you looked at the map of the best Penn stations in the system, you would never think that's where they are, because it's never, you know, Penn's never been strong on main real estate or type, class A real estate, because we're a unit level economics concept. We manage to a fault. The system manages the bottom line more than the top line. So the simple site selection process is really, can you see it? Can you get into it? And do people come here? And
Right.
if people would step back from the complicated, all the data and the modeling that I've done over the years, is a very helpful arrow in the quiver. But I've seen people talk themselves in and out of locations for obscure reasons, either trying, a lot of them, frankly, trying to justify it. And, it's tough in the franchise world because you have a brand that wants to scale and grow, and you have development agreements and territories that you paid for that you need to hit. But in the same respect, it's return on equity is the simple equation. So, the store they've gotten very expensive to build, but, I'm fortunate that our stores do about 25% higher than system average volume. And, site selection is very important. You're there for essentially, you're putting, at this point, $650,000 to build a store. You got to be right. Because if you're wrong, it's a very, very long return. And if you're right, your returns are pretty good. So you still got to drive. It's still driven by your business, but on a selection standpoint, they overcomplicate it. Complex.
Yeah.
We used to have a term at Penn Station that I still use to this day, and I love it, which is don't Fortune 500 it.
Right.
Yeah. Just keep it simple. If you don't go there, if you can't see it and you can't drive into it and you can't park there, this is more applicable on the marketing side of the business.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a concept that people do, and I see it all the time, especially in marketing, is you put on your suit and you go to work and you make business decisions, and you come home and you put on sweatpants and you make personal decisions.
Right.
And they're completely opposite, right? When somebody says, I want to spend a $5 million advertising budget on TV because we need to be on, Penn Station needs to have TV commercials. And I say, do you watch TV commercials? No, never. Never watch them. I either take the dog out or I get a beer. I only stream. Then why do you think everybody else is watching them?
Right.
Well, because I'm smart. You're not smart. I mean, I had an advertising executive come to sell me radio out of Indianapolis, and I said, I like the new guy in Bob and Tom. I always listened to Bob and Tom as a kid. And I said, I like the new guy in Bob and Tom. The guy's here to sell me radio. And he says, oh, I don't listen to the radio. I haven't in years. I listen to Spotify. And I'm like, this is my point. So he's in a suit in a meeting making one decision, and then he does something completely opposite. I think people overcomplicate things, and they don't, there's deviations, right? But generally, consumers behave largely the same way. If you're not watching TV commercials intently, when's the last time you watched a Bengals game without a phone in your hand, let alone commercials?
Yep.
If you
Doesn't
look at
happen.
spikes on Twitter, it's always during commercial time.
Correct.
And
Yeah.
yet we want to disproportionately invest ad dollars into TV commercials. Same with radio.
Hmm.
Who who waits for the radio commercials to roll through?
Never. It doesn't happen.
So I
Yeah.
would say, long answer to your short question is, I think you got to still look through everything in the mind of the consumer.
Right. Yep. That makes sense. So you mentioned, in the comment about what were some of the first steps in your process in the financing. So obviously it sounds like there's some bank financing involved. There's, private money that you're able to raise from investors, but how do you typically go about financing these deals? Are they term loans? Are they partnerships? Or what are some of the best ways that
It's the
you
blend. I
structure?
would tell you, one piece of advice I got, the world's filled with unsolicited advice, but there's a lot of those little tidbits I keep with me. And one was from Jeff at Penn Station when I left. He said, "Hey, I'm going to give you some advice that you probably don't want to hear." And I said, "Yeah, what is it?" And he said, "Get yourself an attorney, a CPA, and a banker that's your age and can grow with you." And I thought, man, that makes so much sense. And I was fortunate to have that, especially getting started, so important. But
Yeah.
this was all new to me. I didn't understand. I think the hardest piece of the puzzle that never clicked for me was, how do you, unless you have a bunch of capital, or you're born into capital, or however you got it, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Uh, how do you do it, right? How do you get started, and how do you replace at that point, a decent living? And I was fortunate in my previous career that I sat in the middle of a lot of transactions, and I got to watch it. And that's when I learned the piece that clicked is the leverage piece, is that you're not paying it, $10 million for a company. You're taking the company's balance sheet and their P&L, and you're leveraging off of that, and you're creating a cap table. So first deal, was I would say pretty freaking traditional in terms of 20% equity. So,
Yeah.
you learn that, hey, your buy-ins aren't what you think they are. Your pro rata, capitalization of it is based on the cap table, the equity stack. So at 20%, it's like, oh, that makes sense. Again, good timing, fortune. 2021, you got COVID going on, and there's no SBA fees, and rates are insane. So I think it was 3.25, 7-year fixed. Pretty
Nice.
simple transaction. And then the generous feds are paying 3 or 6 months of principal.
Right.
SBA, it was beautiful.
Great timing right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. But obviously on the flip side, probably pretty hard to start operating at that point, diving right into COVID.
Yeah, if it's your first deal, the goal is to get where the numbers are so big they almost seem cartoonish, and then it doesn't feel as scary.
Yeah. That's right. 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 So I guess that kind of leads to the other point of, obviously there's financing the deals, there's getting the team together. How do you go about sourcing your deals? I mean, is it word of mouth? Is there some sort of secret internal code that we don't know about, that only
There
Penn
was.
Station
I
people
wouldn't
know?
share. No. You know, uh, for me, I mean, every situation is different, but
Yep.
the vast majority of it's relationship driven. Again, good fortune. I knew everybody in the Penn Station system, right? Penn was my primary focus because I knew how to operate it. I knew what it was, and I knew every operator in there. And outside of that, I mean, it's what I teach my kids now is, it doesn't matter how smart you are, how hard you work and whatnot. If you can't build relationships, you're not going to get very far. The world is still a people business. And so you have to have relationships. And in that process, I would tell you that, there was a lot of people that wanted to put money into the deal. And I've been offered a lot of money to put into deals that I've never asked anybody for money to put in. And I think it's because those conversations over the 5, 10, 20 years that them, they know kind of what your makeup is. They know what your kind of goals in life are. I think has to line up. And, there's a lot of capital on the sidelines, even more so now than ever.
Mhm.
And, I had somebody tell me that, one of the easiest ways to make money when you're nearing retirement and you're well capitalized is to get in on direct investments, because their cash returns are typically high. They're not long-term asset holds that have, restacking debt. I got a really good friend of mine that's in the apartment business, and he does really well. And our structure or style couldn't be more different, right? I'm trying to pay off debt as quick as possible. We're on 7-year terms, trying to go pay down in 5, and just, you run the cash flow. Whereas, if you're a real estate guy, I had a financial guy tell me one time, real estate guys don't have money, they just have debt to borrow from. And those models work out extremely well. Yeah. They're just different. And, real estate typically comes in on, you get rent out once a month, your expenses go out once a month, and your asset, you stabilize your asset, you refinance it. It's beautiful, really. Mm-hmm. Where here, now we're probably doing 4,000 or 5,000 transactions a day. In simple form, it's 5,000 transactions of $10 tickets with 10 to 20 or $10 to $15 hour employees. Mm-hmm. It's, I think people tend to overcomplicate over Fortune 500. A restaurant, generally speaking, especially in ours, is just a little tiny manufacturing line. It is $10 ticket after $10 ticket with a margin on the end of it. And if you can do 200 of those transactions a day, and you grow to 210 and 220 and 230 and 240, it's not a very complicated business. We make sandwiches and put fries in fryers. It's very simple. It's the 300
Tastes great.
Yeah. Yep. So, Penn's got such a strong foothold in Ohio, Kentucky, and Indiana that people love the product. And you cannot grow in this business, especially your top line, if you don't execute quality, cleanliness, and service. And that's probably true for any business. I can't imagine a business where you don't have to have quality, cleanliness, and service, but people forget it.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So from what you have seen, both on the corporate side and now being on the owner operator side, what is typically a good amount of locations, like good number of locations? Like, is there somebody that says, hey, you get to 15 locations, you're set. You get to 25 locations, you're doing well. What is sort of the goal there?
I would tell you, I think you need to get to 5 or you're in no man's land. Less than 5, you're generally owner operator. And it depends what you want to do, right? I would tell you that I have 17 right now. If we doubled it tomorrow, it would be easier than running 3, because everything's built, Right. The hierarchy essentially is, and some of it depends on geographics, but there's 2 companies. There's Buckeye and there's Bluegrass, and there's 3 main partners in each of those, the same set, myself and my 2 partners, and we're all aligned on what we want to do. And each entity has a managing owner that has equity that operates those locations. And each store has a general manager, then each store has about 20 employees underneath that. So there's 300 hourly employees. There's 17 general managers, and there's 3 multi-unit people. I generally, for me, especially in Cleveland, because it's 4 hours away, I generally only talk to, on a daily basis, Joe and Denny, who are the main guys in each market. Yeah. They execute at the store level, and I execute, I tell them, and they like it because it's makes what we do on the back office side has made their lives easier, right? So I'll run the business, you run the operations. And I'm fortunate that I know everything, you know what, because I was around it so long, I knew what to look for. Yeah. And because I've been around so long, we just closed on a deal in December and left the attorney's office at 4:30, and that, one store that happens to be 2 miles from my house, so it's been a problem for 5 years now. Said, hey, I'm working here with 2 other hourlies on a Friday night, which is when we're the busiest. So it's like, well, I'm gonna take my cowboy boots off in the parking lot, roll up my button-down shirt, throw on an apron, we're gonna make some food. And I'm fortunate that I know how to do that, and I can step on a line and I can move food. And everybody's got their own style. I mean, I would tell you, one of the biggest things that I had to learn is that you are who you are, right? I can't be John Bovard. I can't be whoever else I know. I got to be me. And my management style, I'm not a very intimidating guy. I'm generally very, energetic and positive, but I don't really go into restaurants and, push people around or say, do this, do this, do that. I typically go in and just do it. And then I show them what the expectation is, because I think everybody has different expectations. So if I say clean it and I come in and go, why didn't you clean it? They go, we did. And I go, well, they don't know what my standard is.
Yep.
So I'll clean it. And then they'll see what my standard is. And then they can be held accountable to it.
Right.
So it, I generally work, I mean, a lot of operators, especially when you're less than five, to get back to your original question, is they get so bogged down in the day-to-day business that you're either putting out fires. And don't get me wrong, the last 3 years, and I tell the guys this all the time, the problems of inflation or supply chain or staffing, this is not unique to Buckeye cheesesteaks. It's not unique to bluegrass cheesesteaks. It's not unique to Penn Station. It's not unique to restaurants. It's not unique to Cleveland or Northern Kentucky. It is a global issue. We're all on the same scale, right? When they talk about minimum wages and whatnot, and we won't go down that rabbit hole, but if that happens or whatever, if you double minimum wage, it's the same for us as it is for Jimmy John's or Firehouse or Chipotle or Starbucks. It comes down to culture and execution, and people generally want to be led. And if you create the environment that they can develop in, I mean, most of my managers in Cleveland, they started as hourly employees, and now, our average GM pay in Cleveland's probably $90,000.
Yeah.
So
not bad. But yeah, that's a great point. When you talk about scalability and having the scale, that's very interesting to know, is, kind of that you want to get to that 5 or more target area, and then you can use your resources and leverage your resources accordingly. So
yeah, I was fortunate that we have, back office with my partner's, main business, and a great controller and back office support. And most operators, especially, I know some guys that are at 9-10 stores where it's like, they're buried in administrative work and insurance and payroll. And it's like, man, get yourself an admin or get yourself a bookkeeper.
right.
It's crazy. If you think about how much your time is worth and you're spent doing this, and I think 5 really puts you at a point where you can do that and get out. But people get lost in the weeds on that stuff, and they don't, one of my partners always challenged me on that, of stay up at 30,000 foot. So you can see the business and work on the business, and I'm not working in the business. And yeah, it's tough, right? I'm leaving here to go work a lunch shift because somebody couldn't make it. And I generally don't do that, but I like to be in the stores. I like to know, I like when I show up and I can move food faster down the line.
Yeah.
That nobody else knows that, I don't do it often, but there's always comments of, man, the big boss can actually work a line. Like, well, yeah.
Pretty boy.
Do, right? Put a backwards hat on and we'll get to 10. So
that's right. That's right.
Yeah, you got to scale. You have to. And Penn Station is initially, it was, you built one store, then eventually 5 years later you built number 2, and 5 years later you built 3, because we had the back office support, because we were well capitalized. And we're not evolving, when I say we, I talk about Penn, but you got a lot of portfolio investors right now. They're looking to buy cash flow. And they view it differently. There's been a lot of turnover in the system. All good. You got guys that did very well for a long time, that are selling and retiring because they've done so well, and that's great. That's exactly what you want to do. Yeah. But then the new groups coming in, they're, they didn't have those getting started struggles. They didn't work, 7 days a week, open to closes to get started. I've had a lot of the old school guys in the system say, man, you're lucky. I'm like, why? Like, well, because you didn't have to unclog toilets on Sundays. You didn't have to do X, Y, and Z. I'm like, oh yeah, but it doesn't mean getting here is easy. Right. It's still very different. It's still very challenging. It's just different.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So last question for you, Greg. What would you say is your long-term goal for the ownership of your restaurants?
I'm not a big goal guy. I don't like goals. I don't like quotes. But my goal, I guess I said it early on when I left corporate life, my goal was to get to one location, or I'm sorry, to get on the first base of the investment world, which I would, call direct investments. Um, and I guess that was accomplished. So you got to do a new one. And, you know, I don't know. I had an operator down here that, you know, called me in September and said, "Hey, I want to retire." And I knew the operation well. They're close to my house, and I knew that they were going to be a struggle and a lot of work. And I knew that it was going to be a battle, right? And I remember having that conversation at home of kind of like, man, everything Cleveland's great. The work-life balance is great. I like the concept where you might be working 15 hours on a Sunday, but you could go run out, play golf on a Tuesday because you have that flexibility.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a great balance, but um, they wanted me to focus on Cleveland on the corporate side, and you know we'll continue to open stores up in Cleveland, but I had to go back to a relationship and call in and sit down and have a conversation about what I wanted to do. And I knew that, I wasn't going to lose this opportunity in Northern Kentucky because it's where I live. It's where my kids go to school. I drive past them 5 times a day, and I'd been around them for 12 years. I hear in comments, so why is this store closed? Or why does it take 20 minutes there? Why is it dirty? And I'd have to say, I have no idea. I don't own it. Can't do anything about it. And even conversation, with my wife and family of like, why do you want to double down when everything's gone so well? And my goal wasn't to get to 17 Penn Stations last year, but I think outside of the business economics of it, I have goals for what I want, I think, the family dynamic to be. And I think this opportunity here, one, Penn Stations don't go for sale very often, especially in good markets, so I knew it was a one-time shot. But I had a goal that I didn't want my kids to think that I sat in the basement for 8 hours a day and then played golf, right? And that's where you can get to. I want them to see work. I want them to be involved. Cleveland is they understand what I do. My kids are 3, 5, 7, and 9, and they
Yep.
understand what I do, and they understand restaurants, and they like going to Penn Station, right? But they don't get it. They don't get to see behind it. And so I guess in a weird way, the goal for me was to bring the operation closer to home, to where they get to see what work is, right?
Yep.
Behind the line. They get to see how you treat. A very important piece to me was how to treat employees and how to treat people.
Mm-hmm.
And we've gotten to do that, and that's been great. I had them down Sunday morning at the store. We were making catering. They line up the boxes and stuff. So
It's
the
awesome.
economic goal, at the end of the day, if I just said Cleveland forever, I would do everything I wanted to do in life. I don't have many. I think you get one life, and you got to do you, whatever that may be. So I don't have this burning like, oh, I got to double here, I got next year, blah blah blah. I want to execute on a store by store basis in a relatively volatile business. I think you can get bogged down with what other people are doing and comparing yourself constantly to others. So, Cleveland achieved my goal of owning a company and building an asset for my family. I think Northern Kentucky stores maybe checked off an unintended goal in terms of bringing the operation closer to home and letting your kids see it. Because when you own it, there's no childhood labor laws. Put the 9-year-old work tomorrow.
There you go.
Beyond that, I mean, I think you want, my goal down here is slightly different, right? I had to rebuild. I bought a Swiss watch in Cleveland where everything lined up perfectly. The guy that operated the business for 27 years as an employee is now a partner. He's doing the same. It's the most ideal situation you can get.
Yeah.
Down here, it's the complete opposite, right?
Mm-hmm.
It all needed to be fixed. And I had fortunately, time and wherewithal. Very different capital table, right? We went 50% equity because rates went up, still very favorable, but we wanted to be careful. And I was, fortunate with Cleveland, I could, keep up on a 50% deal. but I wanted to rebuild the brand down here in the community. I didn't want I want to be able to tell friends and family and neighbors to go to, this store, go to that store.
Yep.
And, it's been interesting because it's a different viewpoint when it impacts you on a daily basis.
Right.
And, I no longer leave anybody cash tips at restaurants. I now leave Penn Station gift cards. Um, all the same. But we sponsored all the local grade school gyms, and we're putting banners
Right.
up everywhere, and we're all that stuff. And the t-ball teams are Penn Station red versus Penn Station blue, and that's the stuff where, because I know all the schools around town, all the grade schools, I can get into them very easily. A little harder for me to do in Cleveland, right? I
Right.
can't be there if the toilet breaks. I can't be there in an hour to fix it. I had a
Yeah.
guy today that left his key at home at 7 a.m. It's like, yeah, I'll be there in 5 minutes. I'll let you in, no problem.
Yeah.
I do that, in Cleveland. So, um, personal goal, very happy with where things are going. I think beyond that, it was replace your existing, make sure your family could still live, and
Uh-huh.
my partner gave me some advice that I take very closely all the time, which is just don't change your lifestyle and you'll be fine.
Right.
So I think at
Yeah.
some point you want to, maybe allocate the capital to different places, look at long-term stuff, work with a, strong advisor at Incline Wealth or whatever. But,
Of course.
I think for me, I was sitting at Starbucks a while ago, and a guy that I know, who was one of those guys that I had lunch with one time, where it was like, hey, I want to hear your story. And he walks in, he says, hey, you checking your stocks? I go, I don't do stocks, George. He said, you're just like me. You only invest in what you can control. And I thought, you know what? In a weird way, I think you're right. Now, at some point, you look at diversification and all that stuff and different asset
Right.
classes. But, I had to start from scratch when I was 35 years old. You can only do what you can do, and, bust your ass every day and take care of people. And, it all works out in the end. So,
True. Well, good. Well, Greg, I thank you for your time today. It's almost lunchtime. I'm craving Penn Station now.
come on down. I'll be there
Find one.
at 2 o'clock. Usually when I go work a lunch shift, I'll text out, the group and be like, hey, they always get a kick out of it. You
Yeah.
know,
Yep.
Actually, my wife just texted me and said, I'm coming down with the girls, and they get a kick when dad makes lunch on the grill. But the best way to know your business, man. If
Right.
you, there's a lot of smart, we always use the term don't Fortune 500 it, which I love because I think people overcomplicate stuff. I also saw a lot of guys fail that tried to manage their business on a spreadsheet,
Yep.
and spreadsheets are very good tools, right? I have
Right.
tons of them.
Mhm.
Um, but when your organization's is effectively, every touch point with the consumer that I have on a daily basis is made by 300 people,
Right.
that you got to make sure that culture is right, and that they're an extension of you. So,
Mhm.
that's why I like getting in the stores. Even when I go to Cleveland, I still go there once a month, which is way more than the old owner was, who lived in Cleveland, um, just to be in the stores.
Right.
It's still fun to me. It's still, we did a fundraiser night for a local private school a couple of weeks ago, and the sales were up, 200% for the day, and it was a
Wow.
blast. And the crew kind of said, like, man, we've never done this much. We've never been so busy before. It's gone so smooth. And it's like, this is what
Yeah.
it's supposed to be.
Right.
Growth
Right.
is fun. Creating opportunities for people is fun. It it was it was a weird process getting here. I think everybody's got a different path in life. I know you and I have talked about that before, and uh, it's going back to what my partner said. Either if you want to do something about it, do it, and if you
Yep.
don't, go back. Just be happy. And I just couldn't get beyond you know, I had a bigger daily worry or fear of not trying,
Hmm.
right?
Right.
And I've had plenty of conversations with friends that are do very very well in their fields, that say, I want to do what you do. I'm like, do you?
Yeah.
And you walk through and they're like, yeah, I'm good with where I'm at.
Yeah.
Good.
Right.
Be happy. We're
It's
good,
a
man.
different lifestyle.
You do you.
Right.
It's,
Right.
it is. It's different. It's fun. I mean, I look forward to the days when I'm on the other side of the table, or the other chair, so to speak, when you're looking at the next up and coming. You got a guy with a good mindset that's aggressive, that wants to get started, and you can be the 50 or 60-year-old guy there saying, you know what, I've been in your shoes.
Hmm.
I'll try it. I mean, that's my partners now. Let's build it from scratch with you know uh risk after risk and effort after effort. And at the end of the day, people sit in the shade from trees that were planted years ago.
That's right.
So, kind of in the prime that 35 to 45, I want to get double down. And does that mean I want to have 100 stores? No. I mean, I don't know. I haven't thought that far ahead. It's been a whirlwind in the last 3 years. So I don't know. Raise good kids and have a good company, and you're good to go.
Yeah. Well, good stuff. Well, congratulations on all this success. That's quite the impressive journey, over these past 3 years. I have a lot of respect for what you're doing, and then the grind and the hustle, and then obviously the legacy you're building for your family and your kids. I mean, it's a big part to me too. You've got 4, I've got 5, and
one up.
Yeah. Hey, don't be a quitter. You gotta get one more.
My wife.
But yes, kind of the life you're leaving for them is fantastic that you're building for them. So I love it. And if there's ways that they can get out and support the business, make sure you do that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate it. I know we kind of met by chance, and I've always enjoyed the conversation. And I think we had a lot of similarities in kind of mindset, and happy to jump on and share the story. And I think, I was fortunate that I've actually spoken at a few high schools, and I've said, you got to build relationships, right? And
Right.
People, especially in that kind of what I would call the direct investment level, the guys and ladies that have the capital to put it to work, and they built something, they're at the point in life where they also want to share that journey, right? There's like this age you get into a little bit mentorship mode.
Yeah.
And I still do that. I still tried to reach out to people and whatnot and have those conversations, and everybody does it a little bit differently. But like I said, you got to figure out what style works best for you, and you got to be yourself. But the more information you have, I never got that information out of books or a classroom. It just wasn't my style. And so I figured out the way for me to learn, but I, tell young kids our age, right? It's good, go meet with those guys 30, 40 years old. There's a lot to learn there.
Right.
And relationships mattered in the 1930s and it did in the 1970s. And I mean, I get where, economic or, technology and AI and all that stuff, where we're going, and you still got to talk to people. You still have to connect with people.
Absolutely.
If you don't have people with you, you can't do it all by yourself. You can't.
Right.
That or you'll be stuck at one location.
Yeah.
Sure. Scale's good. But yeah, it's easier. I mean, yeah, like I said, you could go from 15 to 30 stores easier than you can go from 1 to 5.
Yeah.
You got the cash flow and you got the back office to do it. So invest in the business, invest in the long term, and figure out what you want your life to look like and go chase it.
Right.
So
love
all
it.
right, we can make some
all right, Greg. Yep. Good chatting with you today.
I appreciate it. Thank you.